YouTube. The Uber tubers.
Yes, so you can chat with people, and that I'm not distracted by people yelling at us for stuff.
Like, that's not how that card works.
That happens all the time. That's not why people listen to this podcast. It is not our informed rules, decisions, or play capabilities. It is our personalities.
Yeah, but you said something
And
wrong on the
smiles.
internet, and therefore you must pay.
There's two ways of dealing with that. One is to not say wrong things or say so many wrong things that the internet can't keep up, as our president shows.
It takes the Donald Trump approach to being wrong.
I mean,
If you're never right, they can't.
the coffee thing was the most I've related to our president in the entire presidency situation. It's like,
alright,
I've
so
definitely
we're
posted
live
important
now,
things
FYI.
misspelled. We're live. Cool.
Thank
I'm
God.
trying to figure out how to view.
Oh, no swearing.
Okay, that's good to
Heads
remember.
up. Yeah.
I will do that.
We'll edit it out in the audio versions, but
course.
just as a soft
Yep.
rule, hard rule.
I actually usually try and ask that too ahead of time and just make sure that I'm not about to break a rule.
Is that on the live stream? I'm not sure I'm happy about that, but that's
What?
fine. The sentences I'm about to say.
Oh, well, you were saying them after I was already like, all right, what do we want to call this? All right, we're live.
Yep, I'm gonna wait for it to finish airing. Hey. And we're gonna post it on Twitter.
That's fair.
And
No,
You want me to
retweet
post it on the Masters of Modern group?
I got it. I have it all open.
All right.
But we can talk about stuff. What's a pre-show conversation? Did you see Shazam this weekend?
I did not. I was in Sacramento visiting my boyfriend's family, so I haven't been doing anything.
Okay.
I haven't seen anything.
So,
I really want
without
to see-
spoilers, it's the movie Big.
I actually said that. I also confused it with the one that's with Adam Sandler with a similar name, like Big Daddy or
okay,
something.
yeah.
So, but I was talking about that, how it seems like if Big was a superhero movie.
Yes, yeah. And then it was really great, really fun, really enjoyable. It felt a little bit like late 90s, early 2000s superhero movie-y in a way. In the opposite way that Venom also felt that way.
Okay, I never saw Venom because
Venom
that
felt like Daredevil.
movie sounded confused and
Yes.
bad.
Venom felt like Daredevil.
Venom
This
ended up
felt
being
like
bad.
Venom was. I would have loved Venom in 1999.
Oh, like
It was
around
like
the time of like Blade.
Very yes, right, exactly.
Where everybody's wearing trench coats.
Yes.
And sunglasses.
Yes, and it's like the generic tropes of the superhero genre weren't necessarily generic tropes yet, and so like the things that it did wrong in that way would have been like, this is really dope.
You know what? I would have like now that Disney owns Marvel. I mean, not now, they've owned it for a while, but now that Disney owns Marvel and Disney's about to start their own streaming service, so they're canceling all the Marvel shows on Netflix, and they're planning on like relaunching a few select. One of them's on the new Disney streaming service. I feel like Blade would be a great.
They've talked about it, him coming back.
Wonderful.
Very cool.
He has said he's coming back.
Who,
No one
Wesley
at Disney has agreed with that sentence, but he has said it.
Snipes? He's also like Wesley Snipes is like old now. It's like time to like I
I
understand.
mean, maybe it can be a Batman. What was it, Batman Forever? I mean, it's like old Wesley Snipes is mentoring the new Blade or something. You could just have that.
I think more complicated than that sentence. Boop.
It doesn't retweet.
So was Shazam worth it? Would you recommend it?
Yes, I would recommend it. It's there's nothing like. What's cool?
It made
Zachary
me
Levi is like made out of charisma. He is like on a similar level to like watching The Rock, where you're like, this guy is just so likable that like I could watch an entire mediocre show for 6 seasons called Chuck just because he's the main character of it. And then plus find the villain's way better than I thought he was going to be.
Okay.
Because
Yeah, I couldn't even begin to guess what because
he's the doctor that like he's the main bad guy in Shazam, I guess.
Sell us to the they're able to sell us the movie without selling us the drama of whatever the final conflict is.
Yes.
That is nice.
Like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
whole
like that.
trailer is about stuff that I'm certain happens in the first act, and I am happy with that. I'm tired of seeing trailers where they feel they have to show me all 3 acts and things that are happening in all 3 acts.
Vaguely interesting thing, Zachary Levi doesn't show up in the first like 45 minutes though.
Oh, good.
So
right.
yeah,
I mean, but I mean,
Okay.
you get the impression that like, okay, it's about this kid and this kid
Yeah,
in
yeah,
a foster
yeah.
home, and no, wait. now
Spoilers
the kid
for
has
Shazam.
superpowers.
but not really because I'm doing a good job because neither of you have seen it. So
Yeah. So
That's good.
Zachary
this
Levi
may
dies.
be
He
the
dies.
first. This may be the first Disney. This may be the first DC superhero movie I go to see.
So I
You didn't
will
see Wonder
say,
Woman?
I meant to see Wonder Woman. I'd heard it.
You
was
missed it
alright,
'cause it was in
but
theaters.
I missed it because I don't go to see movies in the theater really at all.
Yeah. Aquaman was a blast in theaters in the way
Oh.
that Fast and Furious movies are a blast, where it was a total disaster, but like they went for it. We're in the pre-show. Pre-show is no
If kids
no
are
rules.
watching-
I almost walked out of that movie.
Yeah, no, it's not good.
So it's not even enjoyable to watch.
Oh, I
It's
disagree.
So bad. The entire time I just was
I
sitting
actually
there thinking,
remember
like,
this
none of this
conversation on
makes
Twitter.
any sense.
Tappy
Yeah, I
Toe
can play
Claus
it.
says hi. Tappy says hi.
Hello, Sydney. I love you. You're great.
She's that way.
That's right. I should look at the microphone when I'm trying to talk to people.
All right. So I think we're ready. I've shared it everywhere. The internet has it. We have an audience of 20 people currently,
Sweet.
and we can start doing the music section. Let me know when you're ready.
I was born ready.
Cool. Music. And welcome back to the Masters of Honor podcast. I'm your host, Alex Kessler. Our co-host, Ben Bateman, is not here. Marshall James on the mic is here.
What up?
And today we have a special guest, Nick Prince.
Hello, everyone.
And we're talking about the Mythic Championship, which I am hopefully going to not call Pro Tour the entire time. But
I might still anyway,
Yeah,
and I've never been to one.
Just call it MC London. MC London.
yeah, but you're the MC of the situation.
I'm MC MJ though.
But now there's too
True.
many. I did, and I'm going to do it here because I feel like I should consistently make it happen. Declare war on the city of Vancouver because I think the London Mulligan sounds better than the Vancouver Mulligan.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Vancouver Mulligan sounds like where you go for a nice weekend. London Mulligan sounds official business.
Yeah, there's like a queen involved.
Sounds gentlemanly.
I like,
Good sir, would you like to engage in a London Mulligan?
and it's for problematic reasons, but I think the entire world can point to where London is on a map, and I don't know if I could have, when growing up, point where Vancouver is on a map. If you're like, it's on the East Coast, I'd be like, yeah, it's not. It's,
Like point to Portland or something.
Yeah.
like not even the right country.
Although I
well, there is a Vancouver, Seattle, or Washington. There is a Vancouver, Washington.
I'll believe you.
Yeah?
I have no.
I know this because the
question.
people of Washington, Vancouver have also said they don't like me
If
for
you're listening
the
on the
statement.
live stream at home, let us know. Is there in fact a Vancouver, Washington?
Just-
I'll believe you.
Wait,
with
so
that.
the Vancouver Mulligan was the Scry Mulligan?
Yes.
Yes. So the original Mulligan,
Was the
I don't know what the original
Well, but there
Mulligan
was
is.
the Paris
The
Mulligan.
Paris Mulligan, which is one we had for most of the time I've played Magic, was the one that everyone knows. Then there's Partial Paris, which is what Commander played with forever. Then everything changed to the Scry Mulligan, which is the Vancouver Mulligan, and now we're moving into the world of...
Possibly.
the London
The
Mulligan?
They
London
have
Mulligan.
not made a decision on whether it's going
Yes,
to be
that is
the
true.
London
We are moving for this specific event on Moto, moving forward until this event, and pretty much every Commander game I've heard talked about towards the London Mulligan until after that Pro Tour, and then they'll Mythic Championship, and then they'll decide what they're going to do.
I was talking with somebody the other day, and some people were referring to it as the full grip ship mulligan. You're always getting a new full grip, and then you have to ship a certain number of cards.
That's a mouthful.
I was like,
I'm
full
never
grip
going to
ship?
say that
All
correctly
right.
ever.
No, I will trip over that. I will break the rule of not swearing on this podcast if I try to say that, so I won't.
So to update everyone what we're talking about today, Nick is here. He is going to be competing in the Mythic Championship. So we're going to be talking about preparation for that, how the new set is not going to be involved with that, how the fact that it's on the pre-release weekend is going to be involved with it, and we're going to talk a little bit about the new set and evaluating some of the new cards, or really just the mechanics of it, and then that's the main parts of the conversation. So how did you get on the? How are you going on the Pro Tour? How did that happen? Mythic Championship.
So how did I get on there?
I
So
couldn't even make it 2 minutes into the
Oh, I've already failed 3 times.
it's okay. It's understandable. It was that way for 20 years. Everyone's going to screw that up. And also saying Mythic Championship champion still doesn't sound.
Oh, there's so many syllables,
Like,
and
I-
so many
I
things
can-
are called Mythic.
Mm-hmm. And it's just it's confusing it with Arena. It's confusing it with every other
The rarity.
event that they have. Cards, it's so bad. The way that I got onto the Pro Tour was just through the RPTQ system. I played one PPTQ and won it with Slosnia, and then I went to my RPTQ and I took Selesnya again, even though everyone thought it was really bad. And I managed to qualify, getting lucky, as you have to do to do well in a competitive tournament. You have to get a little lucky.
Well, that's something that like also I've noticed a few times where people have walked into tournament situations and everyone's like, that deck is bad, but it's an established deck that like is doing a pretty straightforward thing, normally making big dudes that attack. The best example in Modern is often Merfolk, where everyone's like, this deck is terrible, it's bad position, and then it wins that GP, and it's partly just because.
Or Affinity.
Yeah,
another
Affinity
good
is a good
example
example
of that, where like if you time it right, like if you hit the right metagame, like there's just no artifact hate this week.
Right.
Like great, I'm just going to run people over with Arcbound Ravager and Inkmoth mixes, and they just won't have the right tools for this. So it's reasonable.
Nick, can we get you to move your lab just slightly higher
This
on
one?
your lapel? Yeah.
Sure.
People are saying that the stream audio is a little quiet on you.
Okay. I've noticed that like my voice doesn't pick, like my voice carries in rooms. It doesn't pick up on microphones very well because I'm just a very monotone person. So maybe that's what it is. Like,
Happens.
is this better,
loud?
Stream? Is this better, Sydney? Am I doing justice? Am I louder now? Am I channeling? Oh, John said hi. Hi, John.
Yeah, we can share the computer so you can see the chat. Then we'll just get distracted by people yelling at us and me mistyping on it. All right, so you've qualified with Selesnya, and now you're prepping for the Mythic Championship. Said it right. Right now, how much testing have you done? What kind of has been your process getting prepared for the tournament?
So I have played Modern pretty consistently for years, but I keep playing decks that just are no longer viable. So I've gone through Bant Eldrazi, I've played Storm, that deck's dead. I've played Mardu Pyromancer, very dead. And then my last foray for like 6 months was Bant Spirits, and now that deck's fallen off the face of the earth because it cannot beat Izzet Phoenix. It's a really big change because a lot of those decks are also very fair decks with the exception of Storm. And that's kind of been what I've been successful with for a couple of years. Like, I'm getting thrown into a new Mulligan format with very unfair decks. So I'm kind of just trying to explore the format as much as possible and then select something and really perfect knowing that deck, right? So right now I'm still in that exploration phase. That's kind of what I'm giving myself through the rest of this week. And then I need to narrow it down to like 2 or 3 things by next week and really just only play those decks and then make a decision before I fly out to another country. Because making an audible in London, where I know like 2 people, is not how I want to prepare for a tour.
And are you on a team? Are you playing with other people that have qualified? Or are you kind of just doing the Moto Grinder thing where you're figuring it on your own?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of people that I talk to, both kind of the SEG people, so like shout out to Dylan Hand and Ellie Warfield and John Semaine and all of those people. I'm talking to Jerry Thompson a little bit because we're friends. He's definitely like giving me feedback when I like come up and I'm like, well, if everyone's discarding cards to the London Mulligan, like is 8 rack good? And he's like, no. And I'm like, great, okay, thank you, friend. And
keeping you from barking down trees that you just don't need to spend the time to figure out.
Yeah, but otherwise, I'm just spending as much of my time playing Moto. That's how I got here. I just jammed a ton of games before the RPTQ. Before that, I played a ton on Magic Online with my first early builds of Selesnya before it was, standard was even established, and we're just going to see what happens, I guess, is my big strategy. I guess I should also give a shout out for the limited testing, too, to like Sam Eilenfeld and Greg Michael, and I think Andrew Ellenbogen's also in the house. We're going to be doing a lot of drafting that week beforehand. So I should shout that out and not forget them.
So maybe let's skip a little ahead on my questions because that's a segue that's fun to use. So for people that don't know, for this Mythic Championship, they're doing something weird, and that is that the Mythic Championship / Pro Tour is happening on the day of the pre-release, which they haven't done at least for a very long time. This has a few weird effects, one of which is that none of the cards will be legal in the Modern section of this Mythic Championship, which is a weird decision, but we'll get into that a little bit later when we talk about kind of evaluating. You won't have access to the set in any real way up until the actual event. So how are you and the people you're working with kind of testing and preparing and planning to prepare for this event?
Well, I mean, one of the ways to do it is to do something that they don't love at Wizards, which is you can just proxy all the cards and try and do some sort of a cube off of that or whatever.
I think yes, but in this situation they have to have an understanding. Like they're not going to be like, you're not allowed to do this when we're putting you in a situation where
Right, exactly. Like there's not really an otherwise good option. So I'm planning on trying to do something here in LA before I leave, where I'm just doing like a proxy draft. Also, you're welcome to come if you're free that weekend. Just proxying all the cards, 4 of the commons and 1 of the mythics type thing. We're going to be just doing something similar in London with all those guys, putting together a big cube, and we'll just play a ton of draft there. And my goal is to be in a good place with my constructed deck so that I can really spend that week just playing this limited format, since I don't have an option to do that right now.
And because they're not adding new cards, at least constructed is, at the most part, not going to change. Yes,
I've known effectively the card pool and what the options are since whatever the last banned and restriction update was, like a month ago, where they said we're not making changes before the Pro Tour. So I've been able to splash around in the pool for as long as I want, and so hopefully that means I'll be as prepared as I can be. But
so if you're obviously testing Modern pretty thoroughly, and they're not making a change based on the fact that if they're going to be testing a mulligan rule and they need data, you're not going to throw out the control with banning some cards out of the format right beforehand.
Yes,
but
that does make a lot of sense.
If that wasn't happening, do you think Modern is currently in a position where cards need to go away?
I've played with Blue-Red Phoenix, and that deck, like I got a little bit called out by my group chat by Dylan, where he posted the screenshot of the day that I tried Phoenix.
Okay.
It was like, this deck attacks for 10 on turn 3 way too often. Like, I don't understand how this is possible. Like, I think that Faithless Looting is not going to get, more fair.
Sure, right. Like, this is kind of, it's capped out on fairness, and it's only got unfair to go.
Exactly, and every Phoenix type card, everything that cares about spells being cast, is going to want to play something like Faithless Looting, because at the end of the day, going down a card is just not as relevant in Modern, where you only need 2 or 3 lands to operate, as just being able to churn through your deck and find the pieces you need, because it doesn't really matter how many cards are physically in your hand. And that was a lesson we learned back in Mardu Pyromancer. And since then, they've just kept breaking the card even more. And now it's Darklight Phoenix.
They're only going to be printing more and more graveyard interactive cards, because it is one of the most popular and my personal favorite ways to play Magic. And Wizards is making Magic specifically for me. But yeah, with that in mind, Faithless Looting does something. And I do think something that has had me worried, and really at this point I think is going to force them to do something, is Modern Horizons was locked way before Phoenix was a deck even.
KCI was still a deck.
Okay, right. So
this was completely different.
Humans was a main deck. Like I think like
the format was a lot more fair 6 months ago when Bant Spirits and Humans were fighting for what's the best deck.
And so you're in an environment where they're just not going to print. Like that's the format they weren't printing cards for. But I can see Deck Fate and just being in Modern Horizons. We've talked about it on the podcast. And that card would be very good in a deck like Phoenix, just because it's another looting activation.
Real quick, can we lower your microphone just a little bit so it's not blocking your... No, you can arm it down.
So this goes down.
This goes down.
And,
okay.
Yeah.
And should I tip this more this way or something?
Yeah, the nut is on the back there, the little wing nut. There we go.
Okay.
Got it.
Great.
Now everyone can see me better?
And I sound good?
Yes.
Cool. I've not hit the microphone, and now that I've said it, I'm gonna hit it 12 times this podcast.
I think this is the key, is to have it coming straight at your chest, so
that
your arms are free to gesticulate.
Yeah, to actually hit the microphone, I have to try.
I've been trying to be a little less animated, because I'm going to do the same thing if I start doing that.
So I've been trying to. I talk with my hands.
So do I.
Well, y'all were addressing Faithless Looting, but I think the other card that I feel like is worth consideration in this conversation is Manamorphose.
Yes, I was actually about to say that. I was like, before we move off this topic, Manamorphose is a busted card and just needs to go. It's only going to become more and more problematic.
I mean, and it's been problematic basically since the beginning. The amount of cards that have been banned with Manamorphose in the deck is pretty high, considering that it is never part of the conversation, or until recently hasn't been part of the conversation of cards to go.
It was a card that Jerry played in the Mardu Pyromancer deck that was very fair. It was all it was just a free spell, and that was just good enough. Like, there were arguments that he was saying with Josh Layton, people were saying you should maybe be playing 4 of these cards instead. I believe it. And now we see a fair-ish blue-red deck that's playing for Manamorphose, and I don't think that trend is going to change. It just doesn't get the credit. Some other card gets the credit,
Right.
Phoenix or Thing in the Ice or, Grape Shot or Young Pyromancer or whatever, but Manamorphose is doing a lot of work quietly and just letting people break the game.
Well, it's kind of so like looking at the cards on the ban list and cards that are like more directly tied to them. I feel like Grape Shot and Primeval Titan are probably the largest subset of cards collectively that have gone cards banned. Maybe Mox Opal would be the third on that list.
I mean, that's the big three.
Or like Arcbound Ravager could arguably be.
Well, but like Arcbound Ravager is not in Lantern or. But because of that, you have a situation where like Manamorphose gets dodged, and I think Manamorphose. So my question, though, finish this before we move on past bannings, is if they ban Faithless Looting, does Phoenix survive?
Probably not. Not in its current iteration. It would be hard to get it into the graveyard, and once you can't do that as reliably, it's a lot worse. Like, I don't see them picking up Tormenting Voice or Cathartic Reunion or whatever like Dredge.
I mean, doesn't it seem like you were mentioning about the number of times that Phoenix can attack for 10 or whatever, like the only way Phoenix even activates on turn 2 is because of Manamorphose.
Yep.
So
correct.
And as we've oftentimes talked about, like Manamorphose is never fair, whereas Faithless Looting is an engine card in a dozen different archetypes, or they enable. Like, there are certain archetypes which are no longer tier 1 or whatever, but they wouldn't even have a chance to play if they didn't have Faithless Looting.
Yeah, but like, kind of, I mean, the way of, I think that it was a very underplayed card up until about 2 years ago. Before that, it was only in unfair decks that weren't doing things reliably enough. Someone put it in, Jerry put it into Martyred Pyromancer, and everyone was like, wait, this is actually just a card that can be a good engine on its own, right? And
there's enough things that it triggers off of, and then on top of that, it is a good mana fixer in a format that can use it.
I don't think that anyone plays Faithless Looting to play a fair game. They use it to play an unfair game more consistently, right? Manamorphose, I think, is also a very problematic card for exactly the same reason. Like, the way that you set up all the like busted turn 2s and 3s with Manamorphose, but the deck could also function without Manamorphose, just a lot less efficiently. I think the problem with Manamorphose is more that it's so free in these decks that just care about like card plays or copying effects or discounting it by 1, and there's just so many different ways to make it so incredibly powerful.
The one thing that it has, if I were to pick the two, the one that has like a slightly larger target on its face being Manamorphose, is the fact that Precedence is bad for it. Like, Ataxian Probe was banned for a similar reason of it's just like, this card is a free card that does too many efficient things and draws you to another card and triggers on these things. Versus, there's a lot of cards in Modern that like theoretically could have been banned at some point, but because they were linchpins of 6 different decks, and in the, Ancestral Visions is a good example of, that because this is making these 6 different decks all function, and if we get rid of this, we kill the diversity of the format by 6, it's worth us killing the Manamorphose-like card that like Storm doesn't get any, Storm gets worse. It's like, I don't think Wizards ever has a problem hurting Storm.
Clearly not. They banned like 8 cards out of
like
it.
Storm is bad right now, and I wouldn't like Flusterstorm is one of my high-end picks of what's in Modern Horizons. And then you have, but Faithless Looting would just kill like a lot of decks that are out there. Goryo's Vengeance decks just kind of go away. I don't know what can kind of replace it in those decks. Not
Dredge.
that like.
Dredge is dead.
Dredge is dead, yeah.
You're just not consistent enough anymore.
The Dredge is the other Storm
Yeah, exactly.
mechanic
I
where
don't
it's
know
like...
It's weird in that if they were to ban Faithless Looting, it would completely reshape all of Modern. Because because it would suddenly
especially right now.
It would suddenly make Tron and Titan Shift the end-all be-all best decks.
But when those decks become the best decks, and Is It Phoenix isn't, then decks like that can hate on those decks get better. So there is a reshuffling that like... It's kind of the old Cobblade problem in Standard, where Cobblade was the best deck, and then there was a bunch of decks that were good against Cobblade, but they were all terrible against Valakut. And so because Valakut was the second best deck and second most played deck, none of those decks could survive in the format. And then Cobblade just hates on Valakut all day long, so it was the best deck. And you have a similar situation now where like, Isis Phoenix is just the best deck, and then there's decks that kind of are decent enough against it and then hate out all these other decks. But if Isis Phoenix was gone, those decks that Isis Phoenix is keeping down could get better.
Another good example of this would be the energy versus mono red standard that was just a couple years ago when they then banned Attune with Ether and Rogue Refiner and the 3/3 dinosaur that are rampaging for Asadon.
Still banned for no
Still
reasons.
banned. Still banned, well, because Hazoret was legal at the time. But that standard was red, which beat everything else, and then energy, which was beat mono red. And the problem was that you couldn't attack both at once. Nothing did that. A lot of things beat one or the other, but fundamentally nothing beat. Actually, another good point to this would be duo standard, where red and Esper were the two pillars.
Right.
Just now, like, you just have this dynamic where there's two very polar opposite decks that are operating on very different axes, and there's no good way to attack both at the same time. And it kind of makes for an uninteresting, or don't want to say uninteresting, but less interesting format.
Well, it's format, diversity in a format makes something more interesting. It's one of the reasons Modern has been to watch.
Yes, definitely to watch.
To play, like, there's an argument that every person who played in Cobblade Standard loved it. That was the form. That's their favorite.
I did.
Yeah. But then it's like it's chess, and it's then really skill testing because the deck has a really fun matchup against each other. I mean, there's reasons for that, but from a watching perspective, diversity is something that's generally pretty exciting, which is why modern Pro Tours and modern GPs are generally really well received while streaming versus the Mythic Championship or Mythic Invitational, right? That was the thing with Duo Standard?
Mythic Invitational.
Cool, getting my Mythics right. A lot of reasons, but I think that the Duo Standard had its issues and limitations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's an entirely different topic, but that format clearly was very limited.
And Wizards made the announcement this week that, like, a lot of the things worked really well. Duo Standard was probably not one of those things. And so we're looking at other things that'll make this more interesting. And so generally they're okay at receiving feedback.
We finally got our command zone at Magic Fest.
Yes, that was a big win. That happened.
We've been calling for a long time.
Well, when at our Magic Fest LA, probably 75% of the Commander voices in the community were all very, very, very vocal and complaining about the fact that this was happening, and we were all
shuffled into the Commander Cafe.
Yeah, was like a big PR miss.
Yeah, they did not have enough space at this last GPLA for just people who wanted to show up.
Well, at any I mean, I've been going to GPs for decades, and they've never had a place for like casual people to play because then you just get kicked out because
they should just have that space
and now they will. So
yes.
Yay, Channel Fireball. So testing. So okay, so now getting into the Mythic Championship and testing for it and which decks you're considering. How much does the new Mulligan rule affect kind of what you're looking at playing or what you're planning on playing?
So that's a big question mark. I mean, it certainly dampens my desire to play Blue-Red Phoenix, even though I was just talking up how absurd this deck is, because I think that it gains a lot less than every other deck in the format. Izzet Phoenix is just a million cantrips, so it would love if everyone else mulliganed worse, because almost every 7-card hand is keepable if it's got lands and cantrips. It's really hard to justify throwing cards away when you care about raw cardboard for Thing in the Ice and Arclight Phoenix and whatever, where other decks can function on 2 cards and just don't need it. Tron can just beat Phoenix with 4 cards in hand, and it doesn't matter that it didn't have the other 3. So I'm definitely looking at more unfair decks. That said, when you're talking about it, it's probably not that big of a shift. Like, fundamentally, having 6 cards is still just better than having 5, and I don't think that aggressively mulliganing with like Tron is ultimately the best decision, especially because something like that you're not guaranteed to win just because you played Karn on turn 3. You still sometimes just lose to Phoenix, just being like, okay, cool, you got my land. I'll just bring back like multiple Phoenixes, kill Karn, and then have 2 Phoenixes attack you, and what are you going to do? So I'm looking at a lot more of the unfair decks, and then I think that that's kind of the obvious step one is like look at Dredge, look at Tron, look at Amulet Titan, decks like that, and then also trying to see like, okay, so what's the next level then? Like what beats these decks that might gain from the London Mulligan, but also have a good matchup against these that doesn't just feel like we're flipping coins.
And I think Amulet Titan right now to me feels like a thing that definitely wins a lot, because a lot of these decks are, especially combo decks in Modern, are almost a I want as many of a certain effect as possible. That's what Storm is. That's what Dredge in many ways is. Dredge gets the benefit of being able to shuffle cards you don't want in your hand onto the bottom of your deck that you want to keep in your deck.
That's actually great.
Yeah, that's a big win for Dredge. But the fact that Amulet's like, I can like get to Amulet and a bounce land and like something that, in any type of way of putting extra lands into play is a big win for them.
And they mitigate their mulligans by having Karoo lands, just fundamentally. Like they probably gain the most out of this mulligan, which has me seriously considering playing with the deck, against the deck, like what do people do to react to this deck? Like I think that especially because this last Open was won by Amulet, the Team Open, the Modern player, the Team Open had multiple Amulet in the top 8.
It's secretly the best second best deck in the format, kind of. Like if you look at the top 8s, it has shown up in every top 8 since KCI was banned, and even before that of every major event that isn't Phoenix.
Yes, I think that I don't even know if it's 1 secret or 2 second best.
Yeah. Well, I think it was a secret until this last weekend, and then it got 2 of the top slots, and it was a mirror match to finish.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that it is legitimately among the best decks, if not just the best deck, and I don't even think it's that much of a secret anymore because like the people who have thought this for a while have been shouting it for months.
Was Matt Nass on it too? I thought he was.
Tell you that.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know what Matt Nass does. Feel free, Matt Nass, to shout out if you listen to this. Did you play Amulet Titan ever?
Cool. All right, so next question on testing for this thing. We talked about the limited rule. We talked about the mulligan rule. We talked about... Okay, so... I don't think the world really... I didn't realize that actually until we started recording this podcast, that the new cards aren't going to be available for constructed play in the new Modern Pro Tour.
Yes.
Mythic Championship.
Probably for card availability reasons. It's really hard to make us register a deck on like Tuesday or Wednesday and then say, oh, by the way, you have to get these new cards on Friday, the same day of the tournament when the set releases. Because that would just be tricky.
Well, and like technically they're not legal. I mean, you're a week before.
Also, so technically they aren't legal.
Yeah.
That's another good point.
It's like a weird decision to have it on the same day, but I feel like there's maybe 2 reasons. You said possibly it's a timing issue and just like this set is coming out later than they maybe thought it was going to.
I have to believe, like Magic, and props to Wizards because Magic has never had a delay, but if you look in the board game and toy industry and all that, which you might have some knowledge about, delays happen all the time. Like it's actually remarkably amazing
that they're as consistent as
which is a good. It's very impressive that they have managed to like never have a delay as far as we know, and I think that the fact that like a few factors like the set was released when it was coming out was released really late, and then this tournament doesn't really make any sense for publicizing the set that it's supposed to be around, and the fact that it's modern and not standard and you can't use the cards, none of that makes sense to me unless there was a delay for a week.
Sure.
And then suddenly it's like, oh, this all makes sense. It's like they are doing the best with a bad situation. So I think that's my argument for why, personally.
I think the only other reason I can think of, and this is total speculation, is once again the control versus the non-control situation where it's like, we are trying this mulligan rule out. This is a relatively important thing and reason to do this. And what if, Karn, the new 4-mana Karn ends up breaking Tron, making it just the best deck because it can find any hate board card they'd ever want. And they didn't want to throw out, once again, all the data they have leading into this by adding 300 new cards. Now, I think that's a smaller case scenario because that's every Mythic Championship.
Yeah, it's also, it strikes me as odd to make a big marketing decision based off of an in-game test of a mulligan rule.
Sure.
Like, that seems very backwards. Like, maybe, because if you look at it the other way, like, was there a set delay or whatever, this seems like the perfect time to test it. This is the only time you're ever going to get a control for the next 4 years or whatever. Like, does this break the game? Right.
And then, I guess a third possible one, and this is more just Magic is changing their PR strategy pretty much across the board over the last, since Arena launched, and doing it this way, combining pre-release weekend, which is a very high profile event in general in Magic, just as culturally, and with the Pro Tour, with the Mythic Championship, is something that I think they would maybe try, especially with Modern, where Modern cares about the new standard set the least. Like that is one thing that is true, is that, and they kind of did the opposite. We saw what happens when they wait a month after the set comes out. Yeah. It kind of ends up just being a boring event because standard is solved by that point. So this is almost the reverse of that, of seeing like no one knows how the limited format really works, so everyone's kind of on the same level there. And then B, you have a situation where Modern isn't being changed.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable point too. Is like a good way to make sure that you get the most eyeballs on the screen as possible would be to pick the most popular format and to put it on the same weekend that you want everybody to be playing Arena. So presumably those people can like have it on in the background or have it, Chromecasted to their TV or on the second monitor or whatever, because they're already there and they can at least have it open so that it counts towards their viewer numbers. That would make sense to me.
Okay, so on my list, Marshall.
So, oh no, sorry, I wasn't.
Oh, okay, cool.
I'm linking things for people in the.
What does it?
All right. Like it is interesting that like they're trying to change this mulligan rule and have new cards come out and test it in Modern, and it's.
There's a lot going on. It's a very weird, experimental, and I think that's one of the reasons it is Modern is that like all signs point to, for marketing reasons, Modern never being a Mythic Championship again in an arena-focused world. I obviously don't want that and disagree with that happening, and I'm a proponent of the Modern Mythic Championship pretty much after the first year of not having one, and noticing kind of the downshift on what Modern looks like without something this high profile around it. But on the other end, with that being said, this is the type of opportunity where they probably have the most chance to try new stuff out, because the metagame of the constructed part of the format isn't going to be warped that differently depending on what you do, while Standard would be totally different if they couldn't do a Standard Pro Tour with the most recent set coming out. That would just never happen.
That would be an incredibly strange decision.
I think that it's very weird in general just to have a Mythic Championship on the weekend of a pre-release, because like you're talking about getting eyes on it, but if you're a person who's somewhat invested in Magic, you're not going to be at home watching Twitch streams and playing Arena. You're going to be at your local game store playing in a pre-release.
No,
and you may be playing in both days of your pre-release. I mean, and like, we're lucky in that the game store that I play at has a television on the wall, and we put up Magic streams or whatever tournament is happening. But most
But it could be
stores don't.
Like people go to the bar during the big game. Insert the sport that you most care about.
Ball.
Yeah, and maybe they're trying to create that type of communal watching experience. I think that if I'm Wizards, I want that to happen. I want people to be watching and cheering people doing well in a tournament that I'm live streaming, and so that is a way to accomplish that. There are also,
and if I top 8, I want everybody in all the stores to be watching me, of course. But I don't know that that's why they like made their marketing decisions.
I think
I hope that they're taking advantage.
I think it's an amalgamation of all these things.
Yeah,
I don't, like the fact that there's like here's 30 different weird experiments they get to do all at once by doing this, and we can see which things like this work and which things don't work is interesting.
It is.
And we mentioned on the podcast before, the last like weird thing about it is that it's in London, where they are a very large country, which also they yelled at me. I'm on your side though against those people from Vancouver. This is all going off. But basically, the amount of, if you can participate in the pre-release at the actual Mythic Championship versus going to your local game store in the city of London, a lot of people are going to make that choice, which is a net negative for every store in London.
Yes.
And London and England itself is easier to drive across from one end to the other location than, say, the United States. So if this was like a Chicago one, the California retailers aren't going to lose money. But in the country of the UK, there's a larger percentage of stores that are going to be negatively affected by this event that's going to be massive happening in their country.
If you did the same thing in Los Angeles, you'd only affect people within like 15 minutes of the convention center, because nobody's driving across LA to go play at the Pro Tour.
Oh yeah.
That's just never going to happen.
If I live in Santa Monica and I get to choose Heidi Ho Comics, which I can walk to or drive or get on a subway for 2 hours to get to downtown at 9 in the morning, it's an easy decision.
Absolutely.
So I think that's kind of, or do you have anything else you want to talk about preparing for the Pro Tour or Mythic Championship or anything like that? If you had a shot call right now, you're going to play for sure.
Ooh, if I have to pick right now, I just played Blue Red Phoenix. That deck felt so good. There's still, I want to give Black Green just good old fair Magic a shot before I definitively say that like for this week. But if I had to pick right now, Blue Red Phoenix.
So I guess on the Black Green train, talking to people, because in-house we've speculated that actually gets a little bit of a bump because Thoughtseize is so much better against opponents that are mulliganing down to 4.
Which was where my 8-rack came
Yes,
idea came from.
and obviously 8-rack is leaning really hard into that, and 8-rack has its own problems, but is black-green a deck that maybe gets that benefit without sacrificing all of the things that 8-rack sacrifices?
Yeah, I mean, I think Thoughtseize and Inquisition are definitely, I mean, one, they have pedigree. Second, it gives you a lot of information against these, against these decks that are trying to put together very specific combos about both what you need to play around, because one of the hardest things in Magic is to play around everything, right? These combo decks could be doing, and also just take these individual pieces away like you're getting at. I think that there's a strong argument for Thoughtseize and Inquisition. The counter argument is you have to be perfectly built. Right? And if the format is going to be a lot of Titan decks, I am very scared to register black.
Sure.
If I knew that it was only going to be Tron, I think I would feel comfortable with that, because that is something that you can attack just one piece of land over and over with. Against Titan, they're going to get to 6 mana, and then you're going to lose the game, and that's scary. So.
That's why Tron has a classic bit of that matchup, is even if you Blood Moon Tron, eventually they just get to 6 mana. You took off turn 3 to play Blood Moon, and I don't have time to get the 6 mana to play Wormcoil Engine, and then you are likely unable to beat that card.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you're black-green and you have 4 Field of Ruin and 3 Assassin's Trophy,
I'm
actually not afraid of this matchup at all. You only have 4 of each Urza lands. I'll just destroy them.
Do you main deck Surgical Extraction in green-black?
I've seen lists that do it. I mean, I think that it's probably more reasonable to be a sideboard card and not just have a ton of dead cards, but it does have some equity with Thoughtseize if you if you Thoughtseize their Primeval Titan and then Surgical it, good luck, Amulet Titan. A lot of your lists don't even run another win con. You have to get there with a plant token that's got +2/+0 or whatever. But I think overall,
plant tokens can get there. They're the scrappiest of tokens.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I love a token. I love tokens. I love tokens that attack. But I'm just not convinced that the 0/1 is the way to do it.
I mean, if we're talking about scrappy 0/1s, obviously Bug Goat from Lorwyn is the way to go. That's my.
You're not wrong. They are pretty scrappy. Tokens. Okay, all right.
I wouldn't mess around with that goat.
There's a mythical Craig who has been a guest on the podcast, also on the Command Zone, goat token from the top decking days out there in the world that you can find. We made a bunch for the pre-release.
I just want to see a commander that involves a goat token.
I'm surprised that doesn't exist. In fact, if you were there's a commander that has goat tokens, I'd believe you.
I'm telling you that eventually we're going to get a commander set where not one of the face commanders, but one of the and it's an extra commander that we just kind of threw in the deck.
Right.
Will be a Kithkin from Lorwyn, who's some sweet shepherd that does something with goats, and it'll be awesome.
I mean,
can't wait.
What's the ally guy who gives double strike in red-white? Not ally, partner.
Bruce Tarl.
Yeah.
Moorish Hoarder.
Can we just get a second one? Because doesn't he have a bunch of sheep in the background of his art, and he's just making goats?
Ox. He does
he's ox. Yeah. Okay.
I honestly don't even remember this card.
So the red what?
3/3. He's a Boros. Yeah, he's 2 mana.
Oh, is he the guy who looks like Braum from
Yes,
League of Legends?
He is literally Braum from League of
just
Legends.
without the door or shield or whatever it is that he has.
He's got the goats.
It's when he ETBs or attacks, target creature gets double strike and lifelink until end of turn.
That sounds awesome for limited.
He's not.
Well, exactly. He's never been in limited format.
He sounds like a great limited card. Yeah. That's my assessment of that card.
Put him in your cube.
Yes, he is dope in cube. I played with him in cube. He's really fun.
He'd give Boros a payoff at 4 that Boros oftentimes struggles to find.
That is legit. Whatever this epic Kithkin goat herder is should just be called the name, comma, greatest of all time.
Or there should just be a legendary goat whose name is simply greatest of all time.
Maybe it's just goat and do the cough thing.
How are we on time?
We are at 40 minutes.
40 minutes. Cool. All right. So, last part of the Mythic Championship conversation is a little bit of a conversation on Modern Horizon, not Modern Horizons.
War of the Spark.
War of the Spark. Normally at this point in our podcast releasing episode schedule while a set is coming out, we do a little bit of a breakdown on the new mechanics from the set.
Sure.
This set has 1 new mechanic, if I'm off the top of my head, if I'm correct, but then also has uncommon planeswalkers and planeswalkers with static abilities, and it has proliferate in a more significant way than we've ever seen. So why don't we go over each of those really quick, and let me pull up the ruling on Amass, because that card has a lot of text.
One-off returning mechanics, like we'll have one affinity card in standard and one.
Yeah.
Well, that's only on the buy a box promo.
That's true.
Which I think is them just being like, buy a box promo, we can do whatever we want, and we get to bring affinity back because we're never going to ever again.
I do love that there's like all this conversation about Nexus of Fate and should they do buy a box promos, and then Wizards like, here's Tezzeret, it has affinity, buy. Like that's their answer, because this conversation would have been about the same time that they were making this card, I think.
So we are looking for...
I guess at least it's a 6-mana Planeswalker, which is inherently a bit limiting.
It also doesn't like do anything on its own. Like, if I remember right, its abilities are like...
Its pluses drains your opponent for the number of artifacts you have, which is not the worst in the world, but it doesn't protect itself.
It doesn't do hardly anything. Like, there aren't that many artifacts in Standard.
Yeah, I mean, in Standard it does nothing, right? I mean, there are artifacts in Standard, but there's nothing significant. I guess Ixalan has treasure tokens, so you can play him off of treasure tokens and do something crazy with him.
I guess you could play Sai and Saheeli and just, like, go off with a non-creature artifact. That'd be kind of fun, actually.
He could do a thing.
Yeah, why not?
Don't count Tezzeret out. That's what everyone does in his life, and that's why he's a bad guy.
Are you saying that he's only a bad guy because nobody loves Tezzeret?
Yeah. That's literally his story. He was like abused and a street rat, and like society and Esper hated him, and then he like needed to prove himself, and then was abused, and then had his mind wiped, and then Nicol Bolas resurrected him. Right. It's from the bad Magic story, which is the one.
There's at least one Magic book involving Tezzeret, which has now been like retconned out of existence.
Because
it involved like
that's piece of this. Yeah. That's this one. That's what we're talking about.
I feel like I'm okay with that.
So first mechanic. Don't disagree with you. We don't talk about that book. I'm going to use Lazatop Reaver as the card that we're going to use to explain Amass. But Amass is the new mechanic. It is the Nicol Bolas side mechanic, and it is basically amass a number, and you put +1/+1 counters on an army you control, which is a token type. And if you don't control one, create a 0/0 black zombie army creature token first. So you either have no token and you get a token equal to the amass power toughness, or your army token gets bigger. Everyone keeps talking about there is one specific card out there that people want to be a thing. That
Zombie
is
Blossom?
It is Zombie Blossom, and it is not Bitter Blossom. It's not as good. And it won't.
It's Dreadhorde Invasion.
Yes, thank you. Dreadhorde Invasion, which is basically at the beginning of your upkeep, you amass 1 and you lose 1 life. Right?
Yep.
Correct.
I did that in the wrong order, but basically that's what it is. It's an enchantment.
It also, if the zombie is big enough, if it has 6 power, then it gains lifelink.
Got it. Okay. I actually have never read that half of the card.
Win an attack.
It does not seem relevant. It's never going to get that large, and if it does,
you're winning anyways.
You've already won because it's attacking over and over, and they're not doing anything apparently, or you've already lost because they're just going around it, and who cares? It doesn't have lifelink on defense.
I mean, the math people have done is that this does kill your opponent quicker, but it is a worse card.
Yes, because the counter technically, like, quote unquote, has haste as compared to Bitter Blossom. That said, Bitter Blossom sees no play, so I'm not sure that what it was missing was that it didn't kill your opponent faster.
There is definitely people talking about a aristocrat style deck, and that is maybe the one place I can imagine this doing something, just because it is a Bitter Blossom for a deck that's looking to sacrifice the token every turn versus someone who's trying to attack with an army of flying 1/1s. But otherwise, I don't see this being a real thing. Yeah. But Amass in general is a cool mechanic. I mean, it's fun that it either switches from this card makes a token or is a pump spell depending on what your board state is. It's definitely a weird and complicated wording for a mechanic, but I think that they just, from like a playability perspective, it's probably really easy to figure out.
Yeah, I bet it plays. It is very wordy to read, but I bet that it plays very easily. Yeah. You amass, you just flick the dice up to 3 from 2 or whatever, and that's fine.
You have a dice and a mass token, and then you only ever need 1, and then you're good. And then the next mechanic is Proliferate, which Proliferate is a returning mechanic. It's from Scars of Mirrodin block. Mark Rosewater actually on Monday wrote a really good article of like how many times they've tried getting it into Standard and it failed every time. And it's interesting that the main thing that has prevented it hasn't been stuff like Energy, which is something they said was fine. It's +1/+1 counter themed sets don't work with Proliferate inside. It's too much of a swing, and so it's impossible to cost. Yeah. And so we're now in the standard where planeswalkers are really the thing that's ticking up, and it's a kind of a perfect environment, especially because the knob on a planeswalker with 4 loyalty and a -2 is the same as a planeswalker with 2 loyalty and a -1. And so that knob allows them to make proliferate that much worse or that much better, depending on the ability they wanted on the set. And that leads us, well, I'm just excited about proliferate to be back. I mean, in a modern perspective, infect is an ability that people, like the land proliferate guy seems like pretty, there is a way to get someone an infect or counter pretty quickly and then take advantage of that is something that I think is fascinating and a possible option.
It's certainly possible. I mean, it seems a little bit slow. Anything, like infect should probably just be trying to kill you in 2 turns.
Correct. Yeah,
rather than over 9 or whatever, but like it's reasonable at least to look at.
Well, I think one of the interesting things about proliferate is that it allows them to create all of these walkers who have no ultimate and no plus ability, which is pretty unique. Prior to this, we didn't really have any planeswalkers who did that.
Sarkhan the Mad.
Yeah,
that's true. I guess Sarkhan the Mad did sort of come with the ability to do an ultimate, but like the ultimate was highly board state dependent.
Oh, his ultimate, yeah, it didn't. I have played Sarkhan the Mad in many a game, and I have never ultimated him.
Yeah, well, because Sarkhan the Mad is like secretly maybe one of the worst planeswalkers. He's maybe the worst planeswalker ever printed, but he's so interesting in what he does that you don't want to saddle him with "you're the worst."
Well, I mean, he actively draws you cards.
Like, he can't be that bad.
I mean,
Tybalt doesn't draw cards.
Tybalt does see fringe, like all sorts of
Sure.
fringe.
I think Tybalt has seen more fringe play, but more as a meme than Sarkhan the Mad has, due to its status as the worst card. Also, it's red-red versus black-red, and the amount of commander decks in the world that have black-red mana available is significantly lower than just red.
Sarkhan the Mad also saw standard play a little bit back in the day in Jund. Like, drawing cards was just relevant.
And it's a removal spell at worst case scenario, or it makes your dork that you got that's not good for whatever reason a 5/5 flyer. And so, like, he's either a dragon with, like, sacrifice a creature as part of its cost, or a bad Bob.
Yeah.
Or Dark Confidant. But moving on, the last thing beyond proliferate, which I think, Planeswalkers is obviously a place to look in modern formats. Infect counters is more of like a control strategy versus like the attacking version of Infect, or decks that just like, oh, having Inkmoth Nexus in my deck might be a benefit, maybe has value. And then, last but not least, you have just the ability to like make things with +1/+1 counters. Combos do really well if there's a card that does that. Hardened Scales being the main deck currently doing that in the format.
Yeah.
Now I don't think we've seen a proliferate card yet that is going to be that good in.
Not a proliferate card. The only card I can think of that might work in sort of a Hardened Scales one is Neoform, not Hydroform, Neoform. The one that it's like a mini Eldritch Revolution. I think it gets a counter when it enters play.
I'm looking for it.
It's a gold card in Cynic.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Neoform I do, but it's not a proliferate card.
It's not a proliferate card, but it works with that counter scheme that you're talking about.
I do think Neoform is just a card, like.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, but it's also, but in Hardened Scales specifically, when you brought that up, it's like the ability to go find a Ravager, and when you have Hardened Scales in play or whatever, or an Arcbound Ravager, or a Arcbound, it's the 1/1 worker, and just like sacrificing something else, now it gets a counter, which is going to be double that because of Hardened Scales or whatever. Like, that's not irrelevant. I don't know that it's good enough, but it is another piece that they could consider. And
people have shown there's like a few different ways that like with this normal board state that's not that ridiculous, you can just win by casting this spell at that moment. And so like any tutor is generally something to look at, especially at 2 mana, and this gains a bunch of value beyond that because sacking a 2-drop to get Kitchen Finks is fine, or sacking a 1-drop to get Devotion Druid. Yeah, Devotion Druid. And then giving an extra counter so it can tap for 3 times to get you 3 mana off of it is good. So there's definitely things that's possible that's powerful with it. But last but not least, static abilities on Planeswalkers.
Yeah, that's the bread and butter of where we'd be looking.
Right. There's a bunch. Currently, I think, on the ones that have been previewed so far, and we'll do a full set review where we talk about every card that we think maybe has a possibility to be relevant in Modern, but Teferi is, I think, my pick for number 1 that we've seen so far, but Karn was released literally before recording this episode. Where are you at?
I don't love Teferi.
Really?
But no, I just don't see it.
Okay.
His ability.
Well, okay. In a world with Arclight Phoenix in the format, as is now, most Planeswalkers are bad.
True. I mean, okay. Like I'll grant you that. I guess like it could be kind of it could kind of be okay against some creature decks, but like most instants in Modern are counter spells, which would obviously be good against that, but there's a very small amount of that.
Sure.
And removal, which presumably if you're playing a Planeswalker, you don't really care about removal that much. So you could just invalidate all of their Fatal Pushes and Bolts, well, maybe not Bolt, but and Path to Exiles and whatever by playing blue-white control as it is without this card at all.
Right. I think more to me it's counter magic mirrors. And then also being able to just once you play this, it has kind of an effect that old Jace used to have, where once you play this, your opponent is never really going to be able to do anything without you reacting to it on them. Yeah. And then, worst case scenario, it cantrips.
I think it's okay for that. Yeah. The problem I see with it is that while that's true, it also doesn't really do anything. You're tapping 3 to play a card that will kind of let you play sorceries.
Sure.
At faster speed,
well, but I mean,
and maybe
it bounces a creature and draw a card. I think. Is the
right, but like, so it's presumably we're playing this in the sideboard for control mirrors or whatever,
yeah.
and it's like, what creature are we bouncing?
Sure.
You know?
Okay.
It can bounce an artifact or enchantment as well.
True, so it could get like a D-Sphere or something, which isn't irrelevant. It could get their Search for Azcanta before it flips, which just kind of delays it by a turn, though. But I guess it draws a card.
Pyromancer's Ascension.
It could. It could, but I don't know that I'd bring it against Phoenix, because I think they're just attacking for
all of the damage. Yeah. Tapping up for 4 against them.
Much more relevant in blue-white is
Dovin's Veto.
Dovin's Veto, yeah. The can't be countered negate seems like if you're already in blue-white, it's probably worth considering having something like that, because then when you, for the same reason you play Counter Squall and Grixis, is it's like, you gotta kill him eventually with Counter Squall. With this, you're going to be in counter mirrors, where this is just better than
just going to win, yeah.
And now the fact that they can never resolve a spell is super relevant.
But would you play this over 1 mana counter an instant? Why am I forgetting what it's called? Because this is the Masters of Modern podcast. Dispel.
It depends.
That's the real conversation.
Yeah,
like
you play
negate.
You sometimes play like a negate or 2 in the sideboard of those decks. Like it seems like such an easy switch that I probably
if you're playing negate, you play this card over it unless you're not playing white.
Only if you're playing blue-white. If you're playing exactly blue-white control, then this is an upgrade on your negates.
Well, if you're playing Jeskai or like there's other
then
color combinations.
The mana starts worrying me actually a little bit with that, because I like casting my spells, and at that point I might just choose to have negate always as an option.
So before we started the podcast, you mentioned that you want to talk about the static abilities on Planeswalkers. Which Planeswalker are you most excited about? Karn. Okay.
Karn is
we
silly.
can talk about it.
Karn, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Karn is a super relevant. Like there is a card in Modern that sees a ton of play with this exact ability called Stony Silence, and this is colorless. So all decks have access to that.
Yep.
And it's one-sided, which is super relevant.
Right. I think the fact that you can, like, the thing that first jumped off of me is obviously Storm playing it, and there's other decks that might want to play it, but in Storm, this allows you to play a card that can, win you the game if you have 10 mana, because it can search for Mycosynth Lattice. If people didn't know, Mycosynth Lattice got bought out a week and a half ago because Karn was leaked, and it's because with Karn in play and Mycosynth Lattice in play, your opponent can no longer tap their lands for mana. And he can search for it either out of exile or out of your sideboard, so you don't even have to play Mycosynth Lattice, which is generally going to be a dead card in that deck, unless it comes out.
I actually need to look up Mycosynth Lattice now to see how much does it cost?
I don't know.
Right, exactly. It's like $1 million, isn't it?
I assume it has peaked.
6. Okay, that's not unreasonable. I
guess it's not. People just bought it out. I don't think they've.
Yeah. I mean, there's another one that costs 9 that might be comboed with that usually, but.
Well, no, like the big commander. I mean, I've done this to people because I'm a terrible person, but is the original Karn and Mycosynth Lattice lets you eat people's lands. Oh. Because you can turn them into creatures that are 0/0s.
Okay,
and so
that's
they
fun.
just die.
That's fun.
For me,
I'm here for it. I'm all about making a commander game end.
Yeah,
so.
fair. Yeah. Well, that doesn't end the game. Normally, people just scoop though. Yeah, that's
ends the game.
Yeah. Which he does. So that's the other thing he can do with it. Now, at that point, they can't tap their mana they can't tap their lands for mana anyway. So you're better doing something else. But so there's that as a bare minimum. And so it's like a win condition by itself. It's a 4 mana spell though that if they can hate out your Tron pieces, he can come into play. A lot of the ways people hate out Tron pieces right now are exile effects, which means he can get your Tron pieces back. It's exile and sideboard.
Yeah, but it's an artifact card.
Is it an artifact card?
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. Can't get your lands back.
It can't get the Tron lands back.
Would be problematic probably.
Yes.
Moving relevant regardless, and so he just does a lot even when you're behind.
Sure.
And then does a lot when you're ahead.
Yeah.
Which is what you want in a card.
Do you think if this new Karn became an integral part of Tron, would you then would you then think leaving one map in the board would be something people start doing? So you could, at worst, essentially wish for one of your Tron lands if you're missing it by getting a map.
Maybe.
That's reasonable.
Yeah.
It's a reasonable deck building.
I would want to see. I don't think there is another artifact that can find lands. I think map is the only one.
The most relevant one.
Yeah.
I mean, there's other ones that can find basics, but
Into green, which it does anyways, to make sure that you have 4 of the land tutor that I'm also forgetting.
Sylvan Scrying.
Thank you. Sylvan Scrying. This is why Ben's here. Now this is why you're here. Remembering card names. Alex Kessler's greatest weakness.
All these cards.
Or saying card names correctly. One or the other. All right, so...
On the topic of Tron, probably the best card in the set right now for Modern, I think, is God Pharaoh's Statue.
Yes, that card is...
It's not even close.
Terrifying.
That card is just dumb. I don't see how Tron is not just the most popular deck after the set releases in Modern.
So for our listeners at home, God Pharaoh's Statue is a legendary 6-cost artifact that says spells your opponents cast cost 2 more to cast, and at the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses 1 life.
This card is more terrifying to me than natural Tron into Karn, because you can only play 1-mana spells on the 3rd turn if you're on the play. On the 4th turn, if you're hitting all your land drops, which is not a guarantee in Modern, where decks are typically playing much fewer lands, then you can play a 2-mana spell. So like against even something like green-black, that's their first option, or is it Phoenix? That's their first option to, if they have exactly a Braid or Assassin's Trophy or whatever, blow it up. Is on turn 4, and even at that point, you've still just bought yourself 2 turns worth of.
And in Tron, every turn is a 7-drop or 6-drop or something that's going to be a much more bigger problem than that. So, question: you have 2 pieces that A makes Tron a much more versatile deck, and then B makes Tron a much more powerful deck. Tron is on a list of decks that people generally hate existing. Does this push it over the edge?
I think it might. I think God Pharaoh's Statue. I am glad that this is not legal because they printed that card. Right? I think that it would be a much less interesting Pro Tour because it would basically be like Pro Tour Burn versus Tron. And even Burn can have trouble with God Pharaoh's Statue. Right now in Modern, I think that Karn is particularly weak. I don't love it in Tron even. I'm cutting copies when I was trying it.
7-mana Karn.
7-mana Karn. 7-mana Karn. Like, God Pharaoh's Statue is exactly the card that I wish was in my Gather Research yesterday and all that stuff. Like, I think that this card is actually scary in Modern, and will probably lead to something having to be done about it. Because there's just no good way. The only thing you can do to answer it is negate it. Or Dovin's veto it or whatever. But otherwise, you're not going to be reacting for a turn or 2.
Right. And then you've lost.
Yeah, and then you've probably lost unless they just had a really, they just really had nothing else after this, after their statue. And even then, you still might lose because even if you take care of this, it's not like you're out of.
You've done taking off 2 turns yourself, which means
Right. All you've done is get rid of it.
Right.
For 4 mana or whatever, which is fine. So.
That definitely brings up the value of Ceremonious Rejection even more so, and I'm already a huge fan of that card.
Yeah, well, one of the super annoying things is that unless you already have a 4-power creature in play, Stubborn Denial won't work because it's 6 instead of 7, which is just super relevant. They'll actually just have the 7th mana.
This is a worse. This is would obviously be a worse card if it was 7 mana, but it's just like that much better.
It's actually just very relevant.
Wow.
Oh, I didn't know they reprinted Soren's Thirst.
They did?
Yeah.
Fun fact. Just noticed that.
Was it Vicious Hunger or whatever?
Because every single Planeswalker's got a Planeswalker's spell in the set.
I think Soren's Thirst is the first, and I might be wrong, and I'm willing to be wrong because I haven't memorized every card, but it's the first I've seen that as a reprint.
I think
Chandra's Hyro.
Chandra's Pyro
Helix or whatever is
it
one.
got spoiled this
Ajani's Pride Mate was in the very first day.
I'm just wrong. There's at least multiples.
There's a couple.
You're inherently correct. And Soren's Thirst is okay, but there's a better card in Standard right now. Already in Moment of.
Oh no, I'm not. I just didn't see it. I'm not saying
it's still a cool
relevant.
card.
It's a cool card.
Don't get me wrong.
Calendar Roulette specifically important because Black doesn't have a way to gain life. Cool. So
Black doesn't have a way to gain life?
Not that needs more.
I think you are patently wrong again.
It has ways to gain life. It doesn't have great burn hate cards.
Okay.
That's a different statement.
Yes, that's the statement I meant. Cool. So that's pretty much the conversation. Do you have anything else you want to kind of talk about?
Not really. I mean, I'm excited for the Mythic Championship, and you should all tune in and hopefully see me on camera.
Yeah.
Probably
We're rooting for you.
Oh, there's a quick question. So, as someone who's preparing for the limited portion of the Mythic Championship, and we now have roughly half the set, so some speculation on what you think the limited environment is going to be like is obviously up for change because half the cards.
Sure.
But do we have any feeling about like the speed and how, like, given the fact that there's going to be a Planeswalker in every pack, like, does that change the way you value? You know, there's certain modes of play that are pretty typical and limited. Is there any modes of play that change fundamentally because we're in a set where everyone's going to have Planeswalkers in their deck?
Yes, the format I think will be slower. It's going to be much more intricate, and both of those are kind of similar because there is always the option of what do you attack, which isn't always present. It is just very relevant that quote-unquote bad attacks suddenly become good if you're not just dealing damage, but you're also removing one of their cards, right? If it doesn't matter if I lose one of my creatures, if it removes your best Planeswalker from the board or whatever. The static abilities are going to be a lot to keep track of too, which is relevant. You don't typically have like 2 and 3 and 4 enchantments in play that are affecting creatures, and a lot of the Planeswalkers give all your creatures vigilance or lifelink or +1/+0 while attacking or whatever Donries is, and just stuff like that. It's a lot. It's going to be a lot to keep track of, and on top of that, they've added a bunch of very powerful removal. Chandra is very relevant. Basically all the red burn spells are just super efficient removal spells. There's 2 different 2-cost deal 3 to a creatures, which would just be first pickable in pretty much every set that's been printed for a while. And there's the -5/-5.
Chandra's Pyrohelix is even like comparable to those. Like all of those would be first pickable spells in most limited formats I've ever played.
Yeah, and might just not even be that good.
Right.
But it certainly also means the fact that you're going to be seeing them like middle of the pack means that if you're weak to creatures, like you might just have an option to always kill their biggest threat. There's going to be a bunch of tokens running around. It's weird.
Well, there's we had Andrew Brown on, who was one of the play designers for this set, and he said that we asked what is the best thing you've designed since you started working at Wizards, and he said War of the Spark. This is the best that they've done since he started working there, which is obviously a strong statement. But I think that if this was a fast format, that would be a failure on Wizards' part because then every Planeswalker in the set is not good.
Yes,
that would be a big miss.
I think like you were mentioning about the enchantment nature of these static abilities, that explains I think why a lot of the common and uncommon and rare Planeswalkers with static abilities that affect creatures only affect creatures on your turn. They'll be like, on your turn, creatures you control have lifelink. On your turn, creatures you control have haste or first strike or whatever, so that your opponent doesn't have to sit there, read all of their own cards, reread all of your cards before they make an attack.
That's a good point, but that's actually pretty good design.
And I imagine giving all creatures vigilance is very obvious when it is relevant as it's happening. It's not like, oh, I was surprised that your creature had vigilance, because it's only relevant when you're attacking, and it is very blatant what's going on. Versus and there are obviously Vraska gives Death Touch, but there's more abilities here that become more problematic.
Vraska giving Death Touch is super specific too. It's weird. I remember having to read that card 3 times to understand what it did. Or maybe it's the tokens she creates have Death Touch?
It's whenever a creature with Death Touch deals damage to a player or Planeswalker, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature, and then she creates Death Touch tokens. So even there, it's the tokens that have Death Touch, she's not giving it to creatures. Giving Death Touch to creaters is classically a dangerous thing because it combos with multiple abilities in ways that's
I would love that with Judith. Don't get me wrong. That'd be great, but I don't think or Goblin Chainwhirler. No. It'd be so much less fun.
It would be bad for everyone.
I was all excited when I thought about Judith, and now I'm all sad because Chainwhirler would just ruin everything again.
Well, I mean, giving any creature in limited, just giving creatures with trample Death Touch is the easiest way to make a player mad at you, thinking you're cheating.
No. I get to assign just one to your guy. The rest goes to your face.
Yeah.
Really? Ugh, now we have to call a judge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then First Strike obviously has its issues, and then you get into the pinger world of just oh, these are all it was a standard strategy in Constructed to play Bathless Caller and the fast Tim who does damage.
Cunning Spark
Mage, just because that combo is that good, and that would be better.
I think it's part of the reason we don't get too many equipments that give Death Touch.
Right, there's 3 ever,
and they tend to cost a lot now. They made that mistake one time.
Basilisk Scar. Gave lifelink and Death Touch.
I love that.
Lifelink, the most underrated keyword?
I think that people associate it with like a little kid, like, oh, I'm just gonna gain life, and like lifelink is great.
Yeah, I've
That
never
Sorin-
been sad. Yeah.
That Sorin's ability, there are so many times where I've been playing creature decks, I'm like, I really wish that things had lifelink, or I could gain life, or whatever, just so that these, like, because it changes the race completely if you're gaining 3 and attacking for 3 into their 4.
I'm really excited for that Sorin.
Oh yeah. So for those who don't know, Sorin, as long as it's your turn, creatures and planeswalkers you control have lifelink, and it has a plus of deals 1 damage to target player or planeswalker, and plus 2. And there's a minus X for turn target creature card with converted mana cost X from your graveyard to the battlefield. That creature is a vampire in addition to the other types. It's a 4 mana Sorin, 2 black, white, 4 loyalty.
It's not really your podcast, but I do love that it's a +2 so that you can continually get back 2 drops. And just that play pattern. If it was a +1, it would be much weaker on that. So I'm actually, everyone kind of poo-poos that ability, and I just look at the +2, I'm like, that +2 could say anything afterwards.
Right.
And I would be
every
like,
other turn by
great.
that.
It's going to be really cool that, like, a really relevant -2 is to get back a Johnny's Pridemate. And now, like, having a Johnny's Pridemates have lifelink, and the fact that when you then +2 him, you automatically put a counter on all your Johnny's Pridemates.
I don't think this is necessarily a modern playable card, but I will play this card in every format that it is allowing me to.
Well, do you think, like, we did talk about Sorin Solemn Visitor, and we were comparing him to Sarah, because when New Sarah and him, they both kind of pull for place in the Lingering Souls token stack.
Yeah, and Gideon 4-drop, or like the 3.
Yeah.
Gideon, Ali of Zendikar, Sorin, Solemn Visitor, and now Sarah is a new card that it would be compared to those things, all fit the same slot of 4 mana tokens.
And now they revealed this Sorin, and this Sorin also feels like it somewhat competes in that realm, because it gives you the lifelink part of Solemn Visitor.
Not in a world with tokens.
This is not good with Lingering Souls. It's good with like black, white,
more of aristocrats
or hate bears.
But that said, like, this card definitely does have points where it's going to be better than Solemn Visitor. The fact that it can hit, the fact that it hits things is not irrelevant, even if just players or planeswalkers, right? Like, sometimes you just need to ping a Liliana down or whatever. That's not irrelevant. Yeah. The fact that you it will always have lifelink even if you minus the ability. Sorin, you have to always plus in order to keep that anthem and the lifelink going. Whereas this, you can actually like spend turns getting things back and never lose the lifelink. That's relevant.
Well, and like, say if you like, I'm fighting against a hate bears or death and taxes deck, and I put a lot of work into getting rid of their 2-drop hate creature, and then I play Sorin and I just get it back. Like that puts me so far behind.
Just redundant copies of this or the 2/3 we didn't talk about, the white 2/3 flyer.
Oh, Tomic.
Oh yeah, like hate that card out of my life.
That's what lands lose activated abilities.
I just want like something like that good.
Lands, yeah, I don't know. That card, it affects lands, and it's probably not going to be something that I.
Tomic Distinguished Advocist costs white for a 2/3 flyer. Lands on the battlefield and land cards in graveyards cannot be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control. Your opponents can't play land cards from graveyards.
Yeah, Wizards made this to spite me. It's the only thing I can think of.
Is it because it specifically is like, you can't life from below.
Yeah.
Stop doing it.
Yep.
It's a very effective Shredge hate card.
Yeah, it is really good against Shredge. I mean, it's a card that is good. I understand why they printed it.
It's also a human, you guys.
That's
a relevant tribe.
It's very relevant.
And
it's a flying 2/3 for 2.
Like, why is it flying? That's what's weird.
Yeah,
he's not flying in the art, and he's a human. So
he's got a jetpacky thing, like flying thing behind him, a gargoyle. Because he doesn't want lands to be able to reach him.
Yeah, I'll be honest. This almost feels like one of the the original Amara card, where they switched her in Voice of Resurgence the last second. That almost feels like that, because why does that card have flying?
Yeah,
it feels like it was like
this card existed, and then they put a character on it.
Because also, in the
this
storyline,
be a legendary thing now. Like,
in the storyline, Tomic is just Tesa's paralegal. Like, yeah. So why does he have I thought for a second when I saw that he had flying, I assumed that he'd be a vampire advisor. Because he is in the guild that has vampires, and he is in the guild that vampires can play.
Weird.
Yeah. It's happened.
I mean, but he's a lawman. He's a legalese vampire.
True.
He's a true lawyer.
And he's legendary, so it's like he is special for that reason. Maybe like I think they could have gone rid. I'm totally fine with them not printing humans anymore. So
I would have actually loved if there was a cycle of like the Guildmaster's helpers, like Tomek, Tesa's paralegal, and like Niv Mizzet's graphic designer.
I'm trying to figure out Vanifar's coffee gopher.
Yeah, exactly. Like, Dovin's intern.
Dovin's harried intern, just running through the halls, stacks of scrolls in his arms.
Who does the marketing research of the Ravnica world? I think we got this discussion on Twitter. It's Demir, I think is what we decided.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because like they're the most market. They like subtly brainwashing everyone.
Or maybe they're like the media.
Yeah.
Lazav's reporter.
Yeah.
Press secretary.
Press secretary.
Press secretary. CJ Craig. Lazav press secretary.
Oh, but you can't make CJ blue black. She's so like white blue.
Well, yeah, she's Grand Arbiter Dovin Bond's press secretary. He's also a Manchurian candidate. So like, we didn't elect Dovin Bond.
That's fair.
He's been installed as our leader by a foreign entity.
CJ Craig's a hero.
CJ Craig is a hero.
All right. The final thing we should go out on is quick hot takes on the War of the Spark trailer.
Oh,
it was dope.
Is that a hot take?
It single-handedly convinced Netflix to start making an animated series or a live-action series. Like
Netflix.
Yeah. So there's a copyright issuance that has happened in the last 2 weeks of Magic the Gathering, the series, and I think Netflix is who got it. Or Hasbro, someone got it, and it's like, and then it was announced that Hasbro's in communications with Netflix to do this, and the trailer is what.
Did they actually announce that? I just saw the copyright.
They did not say it was the trailer, but it happened immediately after the very cinematic Magic the Gathering trailer was.
No. I mean, like, did they actually? I just saw the copyright thing. Did they actually announce that they are in talks?
I thought they did. I might be wrong, but.
Okay.
So would this be in lieu of the Magic movie that we're forever waiting for?
I happen to know that Fox still has the rights to that because my boyfriend works for Fox.
Oh. But Fox is now owned by Disney, so now Disney has the rights to it.
It's not clear, but it doesn't matter because it is certainly not Netflix.
All of those contracts are weird. Well, also Netflix has like Fox could be the production company that makes that show, and then Netflix is the distributor. Fox makes a bunch of TV shows for ABC and NBC. It's like
that's true.
Who makes what content for whom is not relevant to who releases that content. But beyond that, a ton of contracts also have like, if your company is bought out by someone else, we can negotiate differently. So like Disney owning Fox could actually make it so they no longer easily, or Wizards has the ability to renegotiate the deal with Fox because they no longer are Fox. Fun contract stuff in the entertainment industry. The one other thing is we got like a character breakdown. So there's a casting sheet that got sent around that we like had on the podcast, and we were the ones that talked about it. We couldn't say where we got it from, but so it didn't do anything. But it was bad. Like every character description was bad. So I really hope that movie is not being made. Yeah.
Oh, from the movie.
Yeah, from the movie they started doing.
Let's think about
like,
what Hasbro has done movie-wise with its properties, and it's like Transformers.
Bumblebee was good.
And
I like Bumblebee.
Don't even come at me with anything from that cinematic universe.
Have you seen Bumblebee?
I refuse.
It's fun.
I'm sure.
It's E.T. the movie, but with Transformers. It's very cute.
He peed all over John Turturro.
Yeah, I'm not saying that Michael Bay did not direct my Bumblebee. The other ones, I agree. All the other ones are bad. I'm not arguing that Transformers franchise has been a good series of movies. Specifically, Bumblebee was fun. Yeah, you're not wrong. That production company that made Battleship actually is our neighbors. They get mad at us when we're
I think they were also working on Monopoly, but they couldn't figure out any way to make it fun.
Yeah.
Because it's awful. It's about the hellscape that we're all living in.
So to give you the brief synopsis,
it was too real. Was the focus group?
We're living Monopoly the movie every day.
But the small synopsis of what the movie was that Tezzeret is searching for the Black Lotus because he is sick, and the Black Lotus can heal anyone's diseases. And then Planeswalkers, I think it's Chandra is the main character, are trying to stop him for reasons. I don't remember everything beyond that, but that was just. There's a whole episode about it. You can watch the podcast.
Oh yeah, which do you know what episode number?
We will link it in the show notes.
Yes, link it in the show notes.
But yeah, so last hot, so I think that the trailer doing as well as it did made it so that Magic as a property being considered for a cinematic experience of some variety. I personally hope it's an animated series, but it's probably going to be, I don't know. That's the one thing I think it has to be. Like, it's too magic focused to be anything beyond that.
Plus, like, you can be like artistic with CGI animation of all sorts of magical stuff.
Oh,
and
yeah.
if it had to be layered over live action, then the eye is going to be comparing the live action to the CGI and will be unforgiving. But you could have a very stylized, not realistic looking CGI style, and then we get away with cool looking stuff.
Well, look at
even if it
everything
doesn't
from
look
like
real.
Avatar: The Last Airbender to the Dragon Prince, which Netflix is doing now from the same creators of that, to the what's the vampire video game?
Castlevania?
Castlevania animated series that they did on Netflix. To
That animated show was impossible for me to watch. It was too gory.
oh yeah,
Like,
no, I don't think that's what it will be, but like I think don't watch Devil May Cry Baby, because not Devil May Cry. Devil Man Cry Baby is worse, and it's another one that Netflix just released where it's like yeah, it's
The time.
don't watch those things, kids. They're all extremely violent. But I think that I think high fantasy is easier to do in animation form. You don't get stuck with needing to pull that off in live action people. You need actors of a specific caliber that people are generally not willing to invest in for a property like Magic. I would imagine you're not going to get Sean Bean to lead your show for the first season, so that's a limitation that I think is problematic. Why every sci-fi fantasy show is generally medium, and if I'm wrong and someone likes a sci-fi fantasy show, I apologize.
Plus, when you do animation, then you can get voice actors who the community has a lot of stock in, but they themselves do not look like the characters that you want them. Mark Hamill and stuff could do a voice in.
Oh, that's true.
And people would love it because he has so much clout in the voiceover community and in the nerd community, but he doesn't look like a Johnny. He doesn't look like, Ezra or whatever. So
Mark Hamill could look like a Johnny if he wanted to. He certainly has had the beard, the hair, at certain points. Just dye that
Karn
white.
too. He can pull off Karn. That's easy. It's not like that's going to be physically him. It's going to be a suit.
Yeah, just call up the cosplayer.
Yeah,
Get the big con.
Yeah.
Karn
He's
cosplayer.
giant. That costume, I don't know. I've Ben met him, and he is. There's an actual
Karn
cosplayer,
Karn
and
cosplayer.
he is a mountain.
Yeah.
I mean, the person inside. I don't know if the costume itself is a mountain. They did a really good job. Okay, so we randomly. I guess that was our final thing. Instead of planeswalkers being commanders, they should be commanders. I don't think either of us have it. Yeah, I don't want to get into it. It was exhausting over the weekend.
It was exhausting.
I think the bottom line was Commander is still not an official format, so play it however you like.
Yep, I'm making Nahiri. It's my move, mostly because I'm unhappy with my current black, white, red commander.
Nahiri would be much better as a commander than any other red-white commander, except for maybe Feather that was spoiled. But
So
even
stuck
then,
for Feather.
Sunseeker and what's
I have yet to be impressed by Sunseeker.
Fair,
and
that's fine.
Firesong or whatever.
Sunseeker.
You're incentivized to play a bunch of burn spells in Commander, which is...
Right.
As a person who has Firesong and Sunspeaker and Commander, the deck is surprisingly more sweet and more fun than you think. You just have to play a whole lot of Earthquakes. It's Earthquakes, the deck.
I guess.
I mean, it's not a great deck. You still have to play, all of your ramp has to be artifacts and all of your card draw has to be artifacts, so you're still...
But you're in red-white, so that was probably always true.
We're getting celebrities who play Magic casting. So John Manganiello plays Magic. He'd be happy to play Gideon. Danny Trejo as Johnny. Joseph Gordon-Levitt as Jace. And then who else we got?
Cash. I feel like Cassius Marsh should play Garuk.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so what is Jimmy Wong doing? Like, we have to give him a part.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I feel like I've always gotten a bit of a Ralph Zarek butt feel off of Jimmy.
Yeah.
Okay.
He could do Jace.
Oh yeah, I'd let Jimmy play Jace.
I can
Oh
see
man, can you just imagine
Jimmy Barrelin
making Jimmy play Jace? Playing Red Mage has to play Jace.
Yeah.
I love this idea. Actually.
Yeah, let's make it happen.
And then,
Netflix. Does anyone have Netflix on the phone?
Can someone give me Netflix?
I'm sure already Felicia Day is like chomping at the bit to play Chandra for real in a TV show.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm here for that.
There's like a
I'm here for
long.
Felicia Day,
I'm all about the casting people who play Magic as characters in the Magic.
I would expect that like all the cosplayers get like even if it's just cameos. Like
oh yeah,
you better get Christine Sprankle and Olivia and Sydney and everybody just like in backgrounds of shots if they don't have a speaking line for them or whatever. Like you got to get them in there.
And the live action version.
Well,
In the live action,
of course, once they start doing the live action, one, then we get like community petitions to be like, when Elspeth is brought into the show, Sprankle has to play Elspeth.
Right.
You
Well,
know,
that's
we
how the
a
podcast
million
works,
strong
right?
demand
Like,
it.
There's I forgot, Voice of All, I think is what it is, but there's a Magic podcast and I have it on my phone that I'll look up so I can actually shout it out. But they do readings of every Magic story and they cast people for it. And like that happens where there's like, oh, we know this new character is going to be coming out and someone has already publicly been famous for appreciating this character for whatever reason. Can we get them to be casted for this podcast?
Sydney has to be Joyra, no matter what. Sydney should actually
Visit.
No. Okay, Sydney can be a visit also. Sydney can be a dinosaur.
Yeah.
But even if it is it's animated, Sydney needs to be
The voice of Jorah.
The voice,
Yeah.
no matter what.
I am bringing up my podcast app. That's what we're doing here.
Yeah, voice of all. You're right.
Cool. Yeah, that's what it is. Voice of all. I got it right. Everyone should be proud. It's the drinking game of this game. Podcast.
Alright, so
Drink when I get a card right.
sign up.
Yeah, so thank you guys so much for coming. If you like everything that Nick said, you can find Nick where?
On Twitter at NickNPrince. You can also find me pretty much everywhere else. I have a Twitch that I don't use often at NickNPrince. Twitch.tv/NickNPrince. I also have a YouTube channel, all this other nonsense, but really the only place to find me right now is Twitter because I'm not making a ton of content or anything like that. I am just preparing for the Mythic Championship.
So Mythic Championship absorbs all of your time and effort in Magic and makes you kind of focus on something?
I guess. Also, before...
See, you don't want us to get on a Mythic Championship.
Let's see. Before this, I also didn't create content, really, so it's just a good excuse right now.
So what Alex is saying is, we're not pros so that we can make this podcast.
Yes, exactly. That's the excuse. Not because we're bad at Magic. All right, so thank you guys all for listening. I am at Tess Wiley. You can find us at the MMCast on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We have a big Facebook group. I forget all the things that are in the automated shop, so I'll do them now. Make sure to follow and check out our sister podcast, The Command Zone. Jimmy and Josh do awesome content. I actually guested on the podcast last week talking about which commander staples that are expensive right now could be printed into Modern Horizons. So they had their list of top 10 wants, and I was like, yep, Demonic Tutor, not a card that could be printed into Modern. That would be problematic for everyone, and that's not one of the 10. I'm leaving those up. That was just an example of what could have happened.
If you want to know what they are, you got to
go watch the episode. And make sure that we have a Patreon. It's how we are able to afford all the things that we do. It's why we keep doing this. We are so thankful to all the Patreon donators that donate to the podcast and helps make sure Marshall is here. And that's why we're able to do all of the videos that we're now doing online with card art, so you don't have us explaining the cards badly. And make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're watching it right now on the live stream, subscribe, comment. If you're not watching the live stream and you're watching the video at home in the regular time, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. And I would love to hear which Planeswalker you're most excited about getting to play in both Limited and in Modern.
And one last reminder, tune in to last week's episode, which was our preview episode where we previewed Gideon's Triumph, and we also talked about a contest.
Yes.
Which if you want the rules about that contest, you'll have to listen to last week's episode. But there's a contest where we are giving away all Gideons that have been printed up to this point. So...
yeah. Not the new one up to this point.
Because we don't know what that one does. But it's the
Gaggle
Gaggle of Gideons giveaway. The Masters of Modern Gaggle of Gideons giveaway. So please.
I guess one last thing before we wrap up on leaks in general. So, especially in this set, it was something that the community was really good about and working together and preventing people from sharing leaks. But obviously, content creators, it's one of the main reasons you kind of do this content from Wizards' perspective is they will award the leaks for free, and when you leak them, it kind of takes that from them. And this set, it was extra bad because every single card in the set has been given away. Well, we didn't talk about that at all, but we'll talk about that later. And then, so by leaking stuff, it's bad, and just generally, if you see a leak, don't share it. But on the opposite end, if you do see a leak, or leaks do come out and become super public, don't feel bad for reading it. There's reasons to do so. For instance, the Mycosynth Lattice buyout is something that you might have been hit by or would have bought into accidentally, and so being aware of what's going on in Magic isn't the worst. Yeah, anything else?
No. Somebody asked when the Mythic Championship is to tune in. The 26th through the 28th, I believe, is the dates.
It is the weekend of the pre-release, the weekend of the Mythic Championship, and the weekend that Avengers Endgame comes out.
which I'm not seeing until
And the weekend that Game of Thrones premieres.
No, that's this
tomorrow.
weekend.
Or yeah, this weekend.
Oh.
Not tomorrow. It's tomorrow when this
There's
episode
that.
releases.
So
though.
reportedly, that weekend's Game of Thrones episode is one with a huge battle in it.
Got it.
It's supposed to be the episode everyone will talk about before the finale or whatever.
Because the last episode is the third weekend of May. We'll talk about Game of Thrones a lot while that's going on. I'm not going to be able to help myself, but we'll do that then. So, thanks everyone for listening. Thanks everyone on the live stream. You're the best. Thanks for hanging out and all the information and talking that you did. And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
All right.
Oh, I paused it. That doesn't end the thing.
I have to turn
Thanks
it off.
everyone.